Welcome everybody. Let me get myself up on the screen here. Here we are. Welcome again to Open Studio with Kristen Jeffers. I am Kristen Jeffers. I am so thrilled to be here with you this afternoon. Before we get into the main meat of what I wanted to talk about today, which is still very important, which is still tied up into everything that we're dealing with, but I do want to take time to acknowledge that we are hearing and honestly every day it's like, when will violence stop? When will all this stop? And of course I sound like all these exceptional folks out here that are not so much exceptional. Gosh, that's the thing. When you see these things happen over and over again, you don't have the words for them. You know, I remember when we had the Charleston mass shooting. Now we have this Buffalo mass shooting, and we have all these people, and we're under attack. And so what I hope to do with this program, as well as the show that I have, is to give more insight into life as a person, life as a human, specifically a Black, queer, feminist, urbanist human. So what we tend to do on this show is, for those of you who are subscribed to my newsletter, let me throw that link up here for you. You can head over to theblackurbanist.com, and in fact, I am going to show you theblackurbanist.com so you can see for yourself what this site looks like and what it looks like to be part of the Black Urbanist weekly on a regular basis. See right here. I'm gonna scroll up just wait, hold on. I always forget that when I start StreamYard, it doesn't automatically come in. There we go. All right, so this is what it looks like. If you scroll up, if you want to get to this page, you see this right here. View or subscribe to newsletter. Highlight that when you come over to theblackurbanist.com. Then I've actually clicked on this week's newsletter to kind of highlight what we're talking about. But normally there's a box here. In fact, let me just hit the back button ever so briefly, just so you can see what it looks like to come here there you go. When you first get here, you're going to see Category Archives Weekly Newsletter. That's just how I have it set up. And this will subscribe you to the MailChimp version of the newsletter. However, those of you who are watching on LinkedIn right now, you will probably already know or may have already seen that this newsletter comes right into you through LinkedIn. If you are on Patreon right now, a portion of this newsletter comes to you on Patreon without some of the advertising, because you do support me financially and therefore you do get the opportunity to be without ads. However, I would love to have ads, and you can go right here, this little green bar here, advertising the newsletter, gonna pop over there, and you can learn how to advertise in both the newsletter and right here on Open Studio. I am gonna go back to real quickly. If you want to subscribe to other formats, I'm going to show you this. So this is a duplicate of pretty much every other. Say if you come in through Instagram, if you come in through Twitter, I have something that says welcome whatever platform readers. And for my Medium folks, that's another place you can subscribe to this information. Of course, there's my image of me there that you just saw in the opening credits. And yes, this is all the ways that you can get access to me. You know, here on theblackurbanist.com, you can subscribe to the MailChimp, you can subscribe on Substack, back over on Medium. Speaking of Patreon, let me throw that ticker back up here to talk about, because two things I'm hoping to do this year is to hire a team to help me like categorize everything that you see here. And, you know, I would love to get back out here with speeches. I am still practicing social distancing. Oh dear. Yeah, you will, go over here. And like this wonderful speech here from years ago. There's so many others. You can get a whole menu of my speeches and everything. So I'm just going to throw myself back up here. So yes, this is what we do here. And so this week, as I'm chatting here, I'm going to throw back up what you started seeing as you were coming into the room this afternoon to kind of set the tone once again as I'm talking for what we're going to talk about here. So let me get that back up on the screen. Let's see here. Yes. We are going to talk once again about, yeah, there I am over there in the corner. There we go. All right. So I'm making myself small so you can just get a sense of these beautiful textiles here, because we're going to get deep into the textiles. And one of the things I've been working to do is kind of sync everything together. So now that little bird pattern that you see, I designed that too. I do these media platforms. I write these newsletters. I have this commentary on urban design. I graphic design. I do yarn. I do all these things. And this week in the newsletter, as I've been doing this summer series that's going to continue, where I highlight different books. And in fact, speaking of the book, let me bring that back up here so you can understand why we're specifically talking about textiles and the connection of textiles this week. I am going to bring up my bookshop shop. I know I've been talking about all these different things you can do to support me, and here I am. I'm getting ready to go into a whole treaty on like how we need to change capitalism, decolonize, and everything. But one thing I always want to tell folks is that if you own your means of production, then that's not exactly capitalism. Now, you can still colonize somebody because somebody owns the means. But I am going to throw up here our book of the week. Our book of the week is by the lovely Aja Barker, who is also African-American, living abroad, who has pulled together in a very wonderful volume all of this work and how it ties the apparel industry, the textile industry, to how it is destabilizing the environment. I know, like, I'll admit, what I'm wearing right now, I did not sew. I wish I could have sewn it. I wish I could have knitted it, but I did not. And I do realize for many of us, especially those of us who are larger in size, the way this world is set up makes it hard for you to find clothing and such. And so I get it. You're going to go to all the different fast fashion stores. I'm not going to pick on one in particular today because it's industry wide. And this week's newsletter, I go into what it was like to live in one of the one-time textile capitals of the world and how it made my world a city, and then going from there. And then I wanted to, of course, chat a little bit about that. There's going to be some show and tell. I cannot come on here with talking about textiles and not have some show and tell, even though more of that is over on the Chris Pattern account, which I'll talk a little bit. I'll leave y'all with that link. But for now, let's see. I've showed you how to get to the newsletter. If you want to support this work, I've got that on the bottom. You can make a monthly pledge on Patreon. You can also do one-time pledges over there at blackurbanist.com. You can click on the welcome medium readers. You can click on the invest in this work. You can book me for a speech. I can pop up right here, exactly right here on your virtual stage for your folks. But we're going to be, what inspired me this week to talk specifically about how my two company arms literally were stitched together is this lovely book written by another Black woman to have an honest conversation around labor, adornment, and the environment, and specifically how this supply chain of the world, where we still, as much as we talk about, and I'm gonna put myself big back on the screen for a moment here. As much as we talk about eliminating slavery, eliminating, ending white supremacist delusion, which is of course what we are dealing with, the white supremacist delusion that implored this person to go in and take the lives of those lovely people, Black folks that didn't get to go home from the grocery store. I mean, I go to an all-Black grocery store myself here in Prince George's County, Maryland, and it could have been us. I'm from an AME family on my mom's side. I also heard that back in Winston-Salem, like, someone was shot. There's gun violence is in this country. It's allowed, just like so many marginalizations are allowed. Insufficient housing, Our metro here is just going down. Like, there's so many things that are here, and specifically in the book, let me throw the book back up here. In this book, it ties it all together. And what I hope to do this week in this newsletter was tie it all together, and tie, at least in my life, living and such, tie everything together. I'm actually going to pull up, for those of you who've read the newsletter, in the by the way section, I talked about that this is a good source for the entire, a good source to start with the textile history of North Carolina. But I'm going to throw this up here again. Let me get over here so you can see it up on the screen. So this is specifically the Encyclopedia. So encyclopedia.org. You can search textiles, and it goes through. It's it's your typical online encyclopedia. Also, of course, there's Wikipedia, but I love as much as I can to support primary sources. Much like with Aja books, she just wrote primary sources and pulled everything together. There's the foundations, there's the folks in Ghana that are sorting through the clothes that were mailing to them. There's the folks who are still enslaved or working in company towns, much like this happened with people in North Carolina. And this was something that was across racial lines, but yes, black folks working in the mills were more, in some cases, at some points, were enslaved in the mills in addition to being in the fields as time went on. But of course, the textile industry in North Carolina started to become the world power that it was. And in some cases still is, depending on who you talk to and who you're associating with. Much like you still go to High Point twice a year to purchase furniture at a commercial level. And I know some of the interior design showrooms are still open. The interior, the household textiles are there. There's some other commercial textiles are there. The company that now houses Wrangler, is still headquartered there. And there's, of course, you can go to the Cone Denim Room. There's so many things in North Carolina, specifically in Greensboro, are named after the Cones. There's a Sternberger school. There's all these elements. J. Spencer Love tennis court. And of course, if you've seen me talk, have a keynote, one of my most recent keynotes, virtual keynotes, I incorporated how Black Lives Matter and the pandemic started this journey for me of thinking about supply chains, thinking about living in a place that I didn't always acknowledge as a city, because I don't know what it was. Maybe there was this rivalry between New York and North Carolina, kind of those of you who like to watch the British shows, the upstairs, downstairs. So in New York, the clothes are designed, and in North Carolina, the clothes are put together. At some point in time, of course, now it's New York clothing that's designed, and the clothes are put together in other places that still have horrible records. We're mourning a mass loss of life. Those of you who are involved and been monitoring the fashion industry may remember in Bangladesh a few years ago, the factory that fell. And the sad part about it was, as I was, and this is in the consumed book, the folks that were working at the bank and at the restaurant at the bottom floor of this building, which had been added onto to become a garment factory, they were warned and they got out. But then the people in the garment factory did not, and everything came crashing down. And so I, as someone who grew up going to the malls, and the malls that were paid for by these textile mills, going to a school system that was, even though it was public schools, the children of the mill workers and all the ancillary folks. My parents worked in the school system so they were a little bit insulated, but they were educating those children that weren't so insulated because their parents worked at other manufacturing operations. Yes, there in some degrees we're bringing some things back, and some people did not go overseas. Some manufacturing stayed, but a lot of it, even by the time I was born, and as I was researching to build some meat into the newsletter this week, I learned that already, by the time I was born in 1985, the textile industry was reducing. Much like those of you who have watched Roger and Me, where they talk about Flint and Detroit and how all those changes are happening. We lived through similar changes. And it's very intense to think about those kinds of changes. In fact, let me get some music in the background, just something to go with this little tune that I've used in weeks past. I'm gonna turn it down so I hear this little ditty and I think about childhood. In the last few weeks, if you go back and watch some of the videos, I can't remember if I had started live streaming yet, but I know I did a newsletter on my inner child and being that kid in the backyard in Greensboro and growing up in a bubble and growing up with the news media coming in and all these things telling me, are you really a city? You're not. Y'all aren't this, y'all aren't that. But as an adult doing urban planning, economic development, and fiber crafting, still seeing that we are still benefiting, and we had benefited, and we were this capital of the world. And let me just show you this adaptive reuse that's happening. So there's a mill, Revolution Mill, started by the Coen brothers, one of many sets of people who were lured to North Carolina in the 1800s because of the promise of cheap labor. Let's think about that. Cheap labor, natural resources, lack of unionizing, which, as I said in the newsletter, did not get codified until 1947. But the one time there was apparently one major strike, people left, but they came back the next day. It's kind of hard to strike on people that pay for your housing, and so that happened a lot. And so when I still lived at home, I was very into watching this evolution, and you can see it here. I've put the video up, and this is I want to note that this is not a knock to anyone who lives here, who's thriving here, who's making their lives here. But as we think about our adaptive reuse of these spaces, and you see the mill right there, you see how huge it is. It's one of the few that's intact. And there are a lot of large mills like this in the state of North Carolina, all over the world. And this is still how it happens today. In some cases, you have sweatshoppy type things here in LA, like in buildings you wouldn't expect or imagine. But here we are, and I'm gonna move that because the stream's not streaming again. But just I just want to take this moment on the video. You can read how I wrote it out in the newsletter, and of course read the book. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And I'm going to say over and over again that we do not have revolution. I'm just going to put some lights on here. We do not have revolution, real revolution, and real liberation on the backs of others. And so we need to be mindful of that. Yeah, you might be able to get clothes every day of the week now that fit your larger body, but somebody had to still hand make that. And they live in a city on the other, well, I don't even want to say the other side of the world, because that can get a little colonial and empirical. They live in a different part of the world. You know, there's that terminology, global south, global north. And it makes sense here, especially like when you think of it, like, think of it being in Canada and in Europe, and everything being further south from those two entities. And then the folks who are in this global south who have been consistently colonized and pillaged and everything. And it's heavy. It's heavy to think about, because there are so many lives and so many things, and this is one area we don't think about. But there are stats, and they're also in the book, that we are at the point. In addition, when we talk about public transit often, trust me, we are going to do an episode. I'm going to do a stream. I'm going to do a specific stream on public transit and its contribution to greenhouse emissions. But textiles and extraction of all the materials, especially synthetics, and even sometimes with natural fibers, and doing them in the quantities that are needed to have clothing at all times of the year, it takes a lot, up to 10%. It's the fields, the areas that have cleared, where we clear fields. It's people that work for little or nothing. It's people that make $3 a garment. And if you've seen my pattern, just the pattern alone is $7.99. Now, people, you might, why are you're talking about? But that is our hands, our labor. We all, as I said in the big block, as I open, and let me put that big block back up there so we can think on this. That we don't just live isolated. That's, of course, a lot of what I talk about here. And hopefully I do realize I'm gonna probably be, just a spoiler alert, I'm gonna be changing some things around on the main site, so they're a little bit more legible. But for now, I just want to put this quote back up on the screen. And I'm gonna read it out since it is a little smaller than I expected. Let me see if I can okay, I'm gonna put this bigger and you'll hear me talk still. While raw goods being made into fabric may have made my hometown into a city, our relationships with labor, consumption, and manufacturing must change. We all deserve to come together with the fruits of our labor on equal standing in villages and markets of our making, or else we might not have an earth left to stand on. Some of you probably saw the New York Times and other news outlets, I think The Guardian, like all those news outlets that tell the truth about the fact that the planet is on fire and it's burning and we're doing too much to it and we need to get back in right relationship with the earth. We're expected to see 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature increase. Now, those of you who know that Celsius and Fahrenheit it's not, I always thought that Celsius conversions was like a 1-for-1 with Fahrenheit. It's just extra, like, not necessarily 1-for-1, but definitely like the same amount of Fahrenheit is what, not exactly. And 1.5 Celsius, a degree, a Celsius degree and a Fahrenheit degree are definitely different, and the Celsius degree is more. So yeah, it's gonna get hot out here. Those of you who live through the orange skies, I know there's wildfires going on right now. You may hear thunder here because we're seeing here on the East Coast, we're seeing a lot more thunder, a lot more flooding. Some of you have seen the tidal basin flood. So yeah, and facing all of that, and of course what I talked about last week with thinking about what the future, how to make a future, how I'm gonna make a future, and how when we first, when the pandemic first started, and I'm looking over here on the off camera here to show you something, kind of my first show and tell, the textiles here. The first, we had to all get on a sewing machine and make these masks because we could not get to them. And so this is the root of it for me coming back now. I was already making my Kristen wraparound scarf, but I never expected to make so many, and I never expected to bring these scarves back. When I was thinking about this post and researching it and everything, I was like, and this was something that I just kind of put to the side. Oh, it looks kind of rough around the edges. Who's gonna, real fiber crafters knit or crochet. I only crochet, and I do this like what's called a pen loom, and a plastic pen loom at that, so it doesn't, some of the posts are wider than they normally would be, like some people. But either way, there are folks out here doing this, and they're not doing it well, and they're not getting paid for it. And this is something that, everybody's not going to be a weaver, a crocheter, a knitter, a sewist. Everybody's not going to put pattern design and graphic design. But that is the thing, outside of doing this and being this mouthpiece and writing these things, that's the thing that I'm doing. And one of the other things is I just love the process of it. I love the process. I love squishing yarn. I love that. And it's been in addition to, of course, growing up around textiles, you know, it was a choice my mom had. My mom thought she would go into fashion design, but she ended up doing teaching. And hang in there for a little bit because I've got a little, one of my links, spare links in the newsletter talked about that. But this fabric, I'm going to zoom it up here so you can see. Image description for those of you who aren't seeing the fabric. This is fabric that has little teddy bears dressed up as bumblebees, and the little bee bear is like pretending to fly. Actually, on here the little bumble bear's wings actually work. And the little bumble bear is in the grass and everything. And I had the original garment that I had for this was a little vest. You know, I grew up in the mid-90s and the vests are a thing, and I had the little shiny satin, definitely not silk, but definitely satin, probably processed locally at that point in time, even in the mid-90s. Those little satin blue vests, bright blue, the royal blue that you see in a lot of my work, and even in streaks of my hair these days. It started early, and so I kind of put down the sewing. I got, you know, just being on the move. And one of the things that you're gonna definitely hear me talk more about is access to raw textile materials, crafting materials, access to the hobby stores, even access to the local yarn shops. I've got maps. I'm mapping it out. I'm having conversations. I'm learning how to teach this, all because I think it's important to have this access. Right now we're dealing with the baby formula shortage, and thankfully people are kind of coming up with ways, but there's still things that just, and yes, I want to make this clear. Breastfeeding is not a solution for everybody, just like everybody gets a choice in what they do with their bodies. Just because there's a uterus there does not mean it gets to be used as a uterus. And honestly, considering that mine is a little bit out of order, as some of you saw on Instagram, I did announce, you know, I'm gonna have to have surgery of a different kind to rectify uterine fibroids, something that Black women have a lot. And some people say it's environmental stress, hereditary stress, potentially generational stress. I mean, for all I know, you know, the ancestors I had working those fields, working these mills, all of these things that are part of the ecosystems and the things that we've been put through. And so honoring my mom as an elder and her ability, where she had to make different choices, but now I'm finding the pandemic has found me fashion designing, and now just all the world's changing. Just being able to hold something and do something, that's my part. And everybody needs to find a part. And you, as you watch these moments, and as you feel like just find something. It's that positive obsession for me. You're gonna find something, whether it's, you know, I have a guitar in the closet that I need to pull out, but I just want to challenge everybody to do something. And of course, I've been working on designing, and you know, I had just decided to drop this pattern out, Beyonce style, overnight, see what happens. And yeah, it's happening. And let me show y'all the pattern. I'm gonna show y'all both sets, really kind of my first foray into textile design, which is my Spoonflower page. Some of y'all are my home improvement people, my folks that are flipping houses, but please just be flipping that house and turning it back over to the community. So these things are available as wallpapers. Well, let me get them up there. I do not know why my face is turned sideways. Spoonflower, if you're watching this, please turn me right side up. But we do live in an upside down world, sideways world here, so maybe it's apt. So this is my these are all the wallpapers, and this is what I started doing. Some of y'all remember this iteration of Chris pattern. Some of y'all remember the iteration of Fabulous Without Frills, which I talked about on the Chris pattern page, where I had the scarf I held in my hand. But yeah, wallpaperings. Now this company is interesting because it's kind of a full circle company where it started in Durham. Someone wanted to be able to customize their own fabric. Someone who grew up in the culture of, if you weren't in the mill formally, you still at home were making your own clothes. And of course, this was something that was looked down upon. But honestly, why wouldn't we make as much as we can? Why wouldn't we at least know how to do it, so that way that pressure is eliminated? And if we want to mass produce, let us now think about how to fairly compensate folks. And so the goal is to get to the point where, and I'm going to throw up what I call the second iteration of Chris pattern, which is what you've been seeing me promote on the respective page and other pages. And that is the scarf pattern making. Now, patterns for now. Not that I won't ever start commissioning. Let's see. This is when I know I have too many. Not that I won't commission work in the future, but that's going to come from a fair way. To me, the most fair trade I can do with this arm of my business is to teach you, to sell you the steps to make this yarn, tell you where to find yarn like this, and to help you make it yourself. I'm going to scroll down on this page so you can get a sense of it. Yes, by the way, I also designed that textile. Yeah, you can buy it here. You can go directly on Instagram, the @ChrisPattern Instagram. Giving you some suggestions. I want to thank my pattern testers. It's something that's really cool and community focused over there in Yarn World, and that people will test your patterns. Now, bigger companies, that's something that should be compensated for, but I do want to thank my pattern testers for donating my time to help me get out there. All of us Black and brown and Asian folks in fiber arts, reclaiming that narrative that we're just sitting in those factories making no money, picking the cotton in the fields, all of that. We are self-determining, and we are reclaiming this ancestral art. I want to shout out So Creative Lounge is getting ready to have a quilting class kind of aimed at Black women. Of course, a lot of people come to their sewing classes, but Black women owned So Creative Lounge right here, also in PG County, Maryland. So it's been cool to kind of in that Hayes House Yarn, my neighbors that make some yarn, you'll see their socks show up soon. But a couple of things before I leave the live stream today that are semi-related, but I do want to leave you with this, that let's think about how our cities are created. Let's think about how, at least for me, my urbanism is rooted in those the mill village and mill villages like that you just saw. So many of us, we like to fantasize about what we did. Obviously we're repackaging these Sears warehouses, and some of these mills are stronger and the masonry is better than some of our new construction, but we can't go in these spaces without having an offering to what was done there before, what was created there before. And especially in this time where we are still struggling with who deserves to be in a country and who's taking jobs supposedly, and who deserves to be a human and who deserves to get paid and all of that. Let's just take that moment and let's reclaim it. Like, rather than picking up a gun to shoot up some people at a grocery store or in a church or wherever, or unfortunately, I just hope that if you're going through something right now, please text the line, reach out to me, because this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I am 100% in favor of getting the help you need. And it is also Asian and Pacific Islander Appreciation Month, basically their version of Black History Month and Black Culture Month and Black Futures Month. We celebrate in May, and so many of our clothing items are made in Asia by people who are not getting paid enough. So if you want to honor that month specifically every day, because I'm gonna be queer outside of June, I'm Black outside of February, and my Asian siblings are Asian, and they are from the Pacific Islands, are descended from. Every single day we're all humans, and let's be thinking about where this stuff comes from, and don't feel too guilty. Like, yeah, everybody, we're not capable, but let's think about where the stuff's coming from. Now, this is a cotton sweater. If I get tired of it, I can bury it in the ground. I did not bring up that video, and I did not link to the video I watched where somebody buried a cotton sweater. But Google like cotton sweaters being buried and watch them biodegrade. Also, you can Google cotton sweaters and the acrylic sweaters being lit on fire and see what happens. And yeah, you don't want your clothes to catch on fire, like, anyway. But a lot of the stuff that's got plastic in it, really don't want that to happen either. And then I had this dress, and you can't see the bottom of it, and it's been years, but some of y'all remember when I was in Memphis, I wore this dress. So I like to wear, if I get some clothes that I really like, I like to wear them more often. And of course, everything that I have made. And finally, gotta check this out. I made myself some thumbless mittens. I don't know why I say mittens like that, but yeah, thumbless mittens. So just, that's the other thing about making. And if fiber doesn't have to be your thing, but I would love to hear from you. Comment on all the different platforms you're watching this on. Tell me what your thing is that you do independently. So before I go, I've already done my sales pitches and everything, so I'm not going to do before you go like I do in the newsletter. But I do want to highlight, a lot is happening here. Okay, yeah, you can just look at the Chris Pattern site for a little bit while I throw up my last couple things I want to highlight. Anybody out here who is watching Abbott Elementary, in addition to obviously this textile work that my mom passed down to me, I also, of course, watched her teach all these children. My mom, for those of you who watched the show, my mom was totally a Miss Howard, and so I wanted to highlight this article from Medium that I had put in the main newsletter. And yes, as I've said before, all links are in the newsletter, and there are links to the newsletter wherever you're watching this at, or it might already be embedded in the platform. Shout out to the Patreon folks and the LinkedIn folks. But this article on Medium from a fellow Medium person that writes, Robin Henderson, it really, really touched on Black women in the education field. Just like the show, it is, as somebody who has been, well, at least in the show's universe, I'm a tailor, but in real life, Quinta is also a me. And then I also linked to an interview, those of you who are Breakfast Club fans, Breakfast Club radio show fans, not the movie necessarily, but the radio show, Charlamagne the God, Leonard McKelvey, he has a series on Hollywood Reporter, and he his interview with Quinta Brunson, they talk about both being children of public school teachers like myself, as I've said in the newsletter, and all of it together. My parents worked in the public school system that fueled all of us, the folks that were working in the manufacturing spaces. And I just scroll down a little bit, just the fact that people are talking about this show, they're lifting it up, it's on regular TV. They really do get real with different intelligences. They get real with, teachers mentoring other teachers, changes, classroom management. There's a variety of people that are teaching there, and it is funny, but it is also spot on as well in a lot of ways. So I definitely wanted to, in addition to having this whole episode dedicated to the textile arts that my mother has passed down to me, I also wanted to shout out what she did to pay the bills, and how Abbott Elementary is a great show that showcases that, and yeah, like it says here, the resiliency and strength of Black educators, hands down. And my mom, I talked to her on Mother's Day, and she told me she's still in contact with her Janine. So shout out to all of you all who are in these classrooms, especially in this past year where it's looked very different, and you've had to kind of survive and figure out how to make your life make sense. And so let me go to my final link, and of course might be the last thing I want to showcase right now while the okay, let's see. while the storms are going on outside of my window here. But when I saw this, and this is, I gifted this article to you for those of you who saw this in the New York Times, but if you want to read it and you're at paywall, you can click on my link in the newsletter. And I'm gonna kill the music on here because this is not like a happy moment. You might be able to hear some of the thunderstorm going on here, and that's why I'm gonna ultimately kind of end the stream in a little bit. But yeah, this house. Oh wait, did I? Hold up. Let me make sure I put it up. All right. All right. This house is Let me run the tape back. All right. So we're gonna watch this happen. If you haven't watched this already, but this is the house that fell in Rodanthe, which is near the Hatteras, basically the Hatteras part of the shore. I'm watching the rain go out right now. I'm just thankful that our house is stable for now. But this is normal. This will be normal. This has happened in generations. The Outer Banks it's a privilege to be there. And if anything, with last week's show and newsletter, looking at the California context of climate change, going this week back to my North Carolina roots about literally the textile changes, and then this part right here. So with that, take care. I'm gonna remove that link. Take care of yourselves. I'm gonna end a little abruptly this week, because some of that was going on out here, and we are in a storm, and I don't want to lose power or anything. But thank y'all for watching. Subscribe to the newsletter here, and I hope to see you on the next live stream. And you can subscribe there if you haven't already. See you again next week. Thanks for watching.